Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to wait another minute or so just for numbers to go up a little bit, and then we'll begin. Okay, I think we're good to go. So yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Ferrand. I'm a Projects and Planning Manager here at BITC. It's my pleasure to be hosting and facilitating this webinar, sharing the insights from the 1920 Responsible Business Tracker. The title of the webinar is Build Back Better. And the reason we've titled the webinar Build Back Better is because we believe that the COVID-19 crisis that we're all going through right now is a really fantastic opportunity for businesses and responsible businesses to really think about how they can build back better and sort of grow from this experience. We're conscious that the data we collected in the tracker was collected prior to the COVID experience, but we really think it takes a really interesting snapshot of the picture before COVID, which can really drive some really interesting conversations as we move through recovery and beyond. So I'm just going to take you through now the outline of the webinar. So when I finish speaking, I'm going to hand over to Anna Jakobsen, Executive Director of Strategy and Innovation here at BITC, who's going to take you through some of the key headline insights from the tracker data. We're then going to have a little break where I give you 2 polling questions. So I'm going to ask the audience to answer 2 questions, and we're going to take a sort of snapshot of your views on how you think COVID and responsible business are going to influence each other. I'm not going to share the results at that point. I'm going to hold those close to my chest until later. So I'm then going to hand over to Professor Ian Thomson, Director of the Lloyds Banking Group Centre for Responsible Business at the University of Birmingham. Professor Thomson is going to take us through some of the key findings in relation to the issues and how different issues performed on the tracker, and also how different sectors performed on the tracker. Following Professor Thomson's presentation, I'm then going to share with you the results of the 2 poll questions. So you can see kind of that snapshot of the audience view, and that's going to lead us into a panel discussion on this idea of Build Back Better. So we've got a really excellent panel today made up of Fiona Ball, Director of the Bigger Picture at Sky, and we've got Andy Brown, Head of Sustainability at Anglian Water Services, Lucy Reynolds, Director of Communications and CSR at Boots, and then we've got Rebecca Birbeck, Director of Community and Shared Value at Co-op. We're then going to have an opportunity for the audience to ask questions of the panel. So please do type your questions on the questions kind of tab that you have on your control panel, your GoToWebinar control panel. You can type the questions throughout the webinar, and then we're going to kind of ask them to the panel at the end, and I'll be supported there by my colleague Anastasia. One other thing to say, a little housekeeping thing, is if for any reason you can't see the slides, there is a tab on your control panel that's called Handouts, and in that side of that tab there's a PDF of the slides. Hopefully you should be able to see them, but if for any reason you can't see them, then you can open up that PDF. Following the panel discussion, I'll then hand back to Anna Jakobsen, who's just going to sort of sum up the final thoughts of the webinar, and that will draw us to a close. Okay, so without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Anna Jakobsen, who's going to take us through the headline insights. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Alex. Well, firstly, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our 94 participants spanning 24 sectors, and you'll see them featured over the next few slides that Alex is showing you. And it's just worth highlighting that each entry can consist of up to 3,400 data points. So there's a lot of work that goes into collating, validating, and submitting this information. And participants have told us that the granularity of that information is really helpful, both in terms of baselining performance, but also in terms of setting out a pathway to improvement. And we'll very much be working with our members to support them with this. I'd of course encourage you all to read the full report, which can be accessed from our website, but I'd just like to draw out a few key findings. So we are very pleased to see that 93% of the respondents have defined their organization's values, and 85% of those state that their purpose statements are aligned to these values. 89% use their purpose and values to inform strategy and business decisions. And what we're doing next is interrogating these findings further, so investigating whether companies with strong values and embedded purpose may have been better able to respond to and recover from the COVID-19 crisis. And what we've seen in this pandemic is that it's really testing the resilience of supply chains, and it has emphasized businesses' mutual dependence. Small businesses can be really vulnerable if they don't have contingency plans or they can't access resources to support the recovery. And this in turn, of course, has an impact on the lives of not only the business owners, but their suppliers, their customers, their employees, and the wider community. And we found that just 29% of respondents reported that they support their critical suppliers to prepare for disruptions. And even less than that, in fact, a fifth only offer support to tier 1 suppliers to prepare for a disruption. And what we also found is that data from the tracker was a very stark reminder of the scale of the environmental challenge that we're facing if we are to respond to the climate emergency and move to a net zero carbon society. Only 50% have reduced their GHG emissions at all over the past year, and just over a fifth have committed to reducing net emissions to zero. 29% have developed some form of science-based net zero or carbon restorative target, but this of course increases in complexity if you're considering whether those targets achieve that much needed balance between decarbonisation and removals that is very much aligned with the 1.5 degree scenario. We found that health and well-being is the most material issue selected by the participants. Nearly half have a comprehensive strategy that addresses the risks and opportunities associated with health and well-being, but only a third set objectives, targets, and KPIs to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of that strategy. And it's natural that we've seen this area come to the forefront of the public eye during the pandemic as people work from home or even isolate themselves from loved ones. And many of our members are using this time as an opportunity to reassess their strategies and ensuring that they are delivering the intended outcomes and that they're doing right by their people. And I think the results as set out in the report provide a very important indication of business behaviours and performance prior to the crisis, and the information must be seen and used as a starting point to really drive the radical change needed to fast forward to a better normal. And as Alex was saying, at BITC, we strongly believe that companies' actions in this pandemic will be remembered by their stakeholders. Now is the time that businesses need to think about their fundamental responsibilities, whether that's providing good work and safe work for all of their employees, whether it's around ensuring that benefits are fit for purpose and that they support those who need it the most, thinking creatively about roles and recruitment and the well-being of all employees, considering how to support suppliers, and also drive and accelerate environmental initiatives. And after the crisis, the time will come to rebuild, and this will be an opportunity to rethink society and build a new model that is more equal, more inclusive, resilient, both in the face of pandemics, but also crucially climate change. And we've seen calls for government and business to form a new social contract that tackles both the immediate economic hardship from the crisis, but also in the future more fairly shares the burdens and benefits from our economies. And they come from actors as diverse as the International Trade Union Congress and the Financial Times. And we've seen forward-thinking businesses already embracing shared value thinking. We've seen them reaffirming and strengthening existing sustainability commitments. And we're also seeing a demand for change among the general population. There was a recent YouGov poll where more than half of Britons taking part hope to make some change in their own lives and for the country as a whole to learn from the crisis. And in fact, only 9% wanted life to return to normal after this pandemic is over. And as the new UN Secretary General puts it, we need to build back better. And at BITC, we are looking at learnings from how businesses are operating now that should be carried forward and further embedded, but also ways to accelerate and transition the role of responsible business from where we are today to where society and the planet need it to be. We're going to be interviewing and surveying our members and a range of other stakeholders starting next week. So stay tuned for more of this. Back to you, Alex. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anna. I think you really captured that opportunity we have right now really well there. So we're now going to move on to Professor Thomson, who's going to go into more on the detail of the issues and the sectors and the insights relating to the issues and sectors. But before we do that, we're going to do 2 audience poll questions. So Elena, can I ask you to please share the first audience poll question, which is, how do you think the COVID-19 pandemic will impact the importance of responsible business? So if I could ask you to please select one of those answers. Brilliant, thank you very much. Elena, if we could move on to our second poll question, that'd be great. Thank you. So the second poll question is, responsible businesses are best placed to respond to the COVID-19 crisis and come out successfully in the longer term. Please select all that apply, agree, disagree, don't know. So if you could just please have a think about that and select an answer. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I'm not going to share the findings of those 2 questions with you at this moment. I'll share them just before our panel discussion. So I'm just going to introduce our new speaker, our next speaker, Professor Thomson from the Centre for Responsible Business at the University of Birmingham. Professor Thomson has been a key academic partner in the development of the tracker over the last 3 years. He's sort of provided his academic expertise in helping us design the survey and also in analysing the results. Yeah, it's been a delight to work with Professor Thomson. I'm really looking forward to hearing his thoughts on the findings. Over to you, Professor Thomson.
Okay, good morning, morning everyone. Just wait for the slides to catch up. Yes, so this morning what I'd like to do is to share some of the key findings from the tracker 1920, and I think that so some of the findings, I think, as Anna mentioned, from the 94 participants and the 3,500 data points, we've actually got a kind of a rich set of kind of data that actually helps us understand what's going on and the challenges of becoming a responsible business. It's kind of a journey often taken without a map or a compass or a guide, and as you'll know, each step forward is a kind of a hard fought, and all progress must be celebrated whilst recognising the road still to travel. The design of the tracker is to help shape your unique journey, and this report is to help you understand how your fellow travellers are doing, where they are, their successes and their gaps. And remember that this evaluation is done in the context of the aspirations of the Sustainable Development Goals, not just in changing your business, but in contributing to a better world. Now, this presentation will focus on the good and the gaps. And some of the key findings that have kind of come out so far is that there's uneven progress against different tracker elements. that there's uneven progress by different sectors, or maybe more correctly, BITC members in these different sectors, because I think it's worth remembering that BITC members are often an exceptional group within particular sectors. I think the analysis of the data led us to this question, which is purpose leading to action, and potentially identifying different sort of like gaps in where we're actually going and these differences. Now, you'll see there's a slide now which has got, you know, kind of think words and kind of pink dots and blue crosses and green stars. I'll just spend a little bit to explain what we're actually going here. So on the left-hand side of the slide are the central elements of the tracker: purpose and value, stakeholder collaboration, down to supply chain and human rights. Now, the pink dot is the average score against each one of these elements. And this is a central element of the tracker. And we can actually see quite a difference in terms of the performance against each of the things. So if you follow the line of the pink dots, we can see purpose and value, and running down to kind of products and services and supply chain and human rights in terms of performance. Just to put it in context, purpose and value, the pink dot is about 74, and it runs down to supply chain of 32. So again, we can start to see a considerable difference in these, where purpose and value is leading the scoring, but actually when we come down to look at actions, it's lagging behind. Okay, so that's the average. Now, if we look at the blue crosses, these are the lowest scoring sector average for each one. And the green squares are the highest performing sectors. So what this does is this allows us to identify the spread of performance across sectors, okay? And where we've got a broad spread of kind of like performance, to ask us the question, why are sectors so different? And again, you can sometimes it's relatively straightforward. If we maybe look at digital transformation, which is one of the biggest spreads between the blue cross and the green star, that's largely, I think, because of the opportunities that hit different sectors, again, vary. So it's about this understanding the spread, because this gives us the gap of the performance, the gap between the lower performing sector and the average, and the gap between the average and the best, that we can actually start to look at these. So there's plenty of room to grow, but it's worth remembering that these green squares are real companies. They're real members. They're members of BITC working in the same environment as everyone else is there. And the question is who are these best performers? How are they doing things kind of differently? And why is there such a significant difference in these performance? It's not just about the numbers, it's about trying to understand. These should provoke questions in your business to know kind of like where you are in this picture. We can maybe move on to the next slide. Now this slide looks at the external circle of the tracker, the healthy environment and the healthy communities. And again, it's done in a similar kind of similar standard. So we've got the spread, and then we have the average. And again, we've ordered these, the list of these elements from diversity inclusion down to healthy ecosystem in relation to the scale of the performance. But it's worth remembering, it's worth pointing out, sorry, that the numbers are significant. We continue the decline in the numbers. So diversity inclusion, that pink dot is 31, okay? So the highest kind of like the average performance and score there is 31, running down to healthy ecosystems at 17. And that's healthy ecosystems at the time when perhaps we've got the biggest stress that we have on our environment. But again, we can start to see the differences in the performance. So we've got working our way down in terms of zero carbon, circular economy, And it's interesting how the data settles out, in that the three measures of environmental performance are the lowest. But again, we can see we've got considerable spread in the performance in there, so we can identify what's happening well. Just a little bit about the numbers in the brackets. That's just that number indicates the percentage of the sample who selected these as being the highly material aspects that they then move in to do the deeper dive and the second level of questions that are actually there. And again, we can see an interesting kind of split in terms of circular economy and healthy ecosystems being incredibly low in terms of being considered highly material, despite the potential impact that they're actually having on everything. I would also like to point out, and Anna mentioned, please read the report. Please read the report. This is just a small summary of what's actually going on in there. But one of the interesting findings was in diversity inclusion was the difference between diversity related inclusion to gender and diversity inclusion in relation to ethnicity. And the findings are actually quite stark in terms of the differences between the relative success of gender, but actually the way to go that we still have in terms of ethnicity. So again, we have this idea where the blue crosses to the pink dots to the green stars, asking questions why in there. And in the report, we've also got some case studies, and we delve into some of the potential reasons for the spread. So there's still kind of like much to do, different performance. And if we could maybe move on to the next slide, Elena, thank you. Okay, and I'll just briefly explain this slide. And what this slide is this is in some ways a measure of the gap between each of the tracker elements and again the very positive score in relation to purpose and values. And these are, if you like, so down the side, the 1, the 2, the 3, these are the order of magnitude change that we need to get if we're going to perform as well on each of the items as we do in terms of purpose and value. So it's a way of the magnitude that's needed. And again, we can see an interesting thing. So things like stakeholder collaboration, policy engagement, future generation, digital transformation, we're still at 1 to 1.5 times multiple to do. So we need to almost double our kind of performance in some of these areas to get up there. Products and supply chain, again, we can see how there's challenges ahead. We need to kind of almost get up to a factor of 2 in terms of the performance. Health and well-being, diversity, inclusion, education, good work and inclusive growth, we're almost needing to get 3. So this is the kind of the factor of magnitude of change that we need. And again, we can see that the ones which are floating up to the top, net zero carbon, despite our climate emergency, despite all the things that's actually going on, is still requiring a transformation of about 3.2. Circular economy close to 4, and healthy ecosystems 4.2 times. So a factor of over 4 to get us to kind of like, if we're doing the kind of we're walking the talk type analogy, that's where we've actually got to move for. And it's also an interesting thing about determining the strategic priorities, I think, that people have. And my kind of observation is that a lot of the progress that's actually been made in responsibility is building on existing strengths within businesses. And again, that's a sensible strategy. But I ask you to kind of question your strategy in terms of improvement, is that because if you're improving what you're already doing well on, there's a risk that you're ignoring the things which need the biggest amount of change. So again, just kind of to reflect on some of these numbers in terms of your strategy is do we improve what we're already kind of good at, or do we need to kind of like maybe change some of our priorities and look at some of the risks which are actually coming back to help us, particularly given our dependency and the lack of resilience that we're actually seeing in relation to all of these issues, but in particular the concern that if we don't build back better and we build back the same, all we're doing is storing up problems for us in terms of the future. Okay, going to the next slide. I'd like to finish on a positive note. I think it's always easy as an academic to emphasize the negative, but I'd also like to finish with a little bit of a high note and identifying the type of sectors, where this performance of BITC members is actually kind of like doing well in terms of the range of where they're scoring first. So the ones in color, they're the green stars. And the ones in black, they're the ones who are just following, often very close behind. There's not often a difference between those two. But we did see that typically there are two sectors in each area were floating ahead of the kind of performance. So these are the people who are scoring well. These are the sectors that you maybe want to look at. These are the ones where if you're looking for inspiration, or maybe reasons why, you know, in terms of specific differences in your sector where you've actually got to look at. So in some ways, these are the kind of like these are where the new possible exists. This is what you can actually do. But the other note is, if we flip onto the last slide, Helena, thank you. We will see that every sector is performing well in sort of like one element of the tracker. Okay. There's nobody who wasn't in the sector wasn't in first and second place. This is an uneven kind of performance between the sectors, and I think it's worth kind of like celebrating the progress that's actually being made, as well as being cognizant of the gaps that need to be filled, and considering the kind of the priorities of future action. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. Lots of food for thought there for us on how we can close those gaps. So we're now going to go into our panel discussion. But before we do that, I'm going to share the results of the audience polls. So Elena, can I ask you to please share the results of the first poll question? The question was, how do you think the COVID-19 pandemic will impact the importance of responsible business? And we can see that 93% have said they think it's going to increase the importance of responsible business. 2% of say they think it's going to decrease, and 5% are saying they think it's going to stay the same. So quite a lot of positive sort of optimism there. Elena, could you please share the results of the second audience poll? So the second question was, responsible businesses are best placed to respond to the COVID-19 crisis and come out successfully in the longer term. 82% of you were in agreement that responsible businesses are best placed to respond and come out successfully. 5% disagreed with that statement, and 16% stated that they can't say, they don't know at this stage. So some interesting findings there of the sort of sentiment of you, the audience. Now going to move on to our panel discussion. So our panel is made up of, excuse me, Fiona Ball, Director of the Bigger Picture at Sky, Andy Brown, Head of Sustainability at Anglian Water Services, and Lucy Reynolds, Director of Communications and CSR at Boots, and then Rebecca Birbeck, Director of Community and Shared Value at Co-op. Welcome to all of our panelists. If I could ask you to ensure you have turned on your webcam, I'm now going to turn mine off. So the first question I'd like to ask is to Fiona. Fiona, it's clear our audience are of the view that the importance of responsible business is going to increase as a consequence of COVID. What are your thoughts on that, and why?
Well, yeah, I definitely think the role of a responsible business is gonna increase. I think it's gonna look different, slightly different. I think the biggest thing that we've learned over the last few months is the areas that to be really clear on the areas that we can focus and we can have the biggest impact. I think as part of those discussions. We've been having lots of conversations and re-conversations with a lot of our community, charity partners, suppliers and employees to really understand what role we should play at this time and what impact we can achieve together and where the biggest need is. So I think it's really important part of it and a really important part of being a responsible business, but I think it does need to be really clear that businesses do need to pivot and they do need to adapt and change to have the biggest impact and to make sure that that impact is where it's needed. I mean, for us, it's been around, you know, really focusing on where we have kind of strong opportunities to really continue to inform and educate and entertain kind of our audiences. We normally do this through our work that we do with the Sky Academy studios, which are big studios that we have in Ostley, Livingston and Milan for young people to come in and to learn some really important life skills at the same time as producing content. And we've had to, obviously these studios are closed, but they're a really important part of our kind of strategy. So speaking to them, we've moved this completely online now through a program called Keep Connected, which is a really important you know, initiative for kind of young people and schools while everybody is working from home, and to be able to provide that and continue to provide that online has been really important. Another thing that we do is a massive part of our program is Sky Cares, and Sky Cares is a big volunteering program that we've got across our 33,000 kind of employees across the whole of Europe. Now, obviously, a lot of our volunteering was going to be you know, face-to-face volunteering with, you know, big charity partners that we've been working with, and it's been really obvious when we've been talking to our employees and our charity partners that this is a really important part still, but it's and we need to continue to do this. It's you know, particularly at this moment in time when communities and the things that our employees are passionate about are continuing to be so. So we've had to engage with our charity partners and look at how and, you know, where we can continue to support them during this time. So, for example, with Age UK, which is a massive charity that we support, we've really helped them build up their Silverline service and got many of our employees kind of volunteering to be trained and to help with the Silverline, which is a really important connection with older generation during this time and connecting them and having that support. But we've also looked at ways that we can, you know, all of our engineers were out on the road and for some time couldn't go into customer homes. So we really shifted support for our engineers. So our engineers, we had 400 engineers out on the road with the Royal Voluntary Service and NHS delivering food parcels and PPE equipment. So it's really important, and it's even more important this time. But I think we have to understand the key to it is understanding how we need to pivot and change, really keeping those lines of communication and engagement with our charity partners and, you know, suppliers and business partners to understand how we need to change to have the impact that's needed at this particular time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fiona. It's interesting to hear, you know, that you're talking about assessing need, looking where you can make the biggest impact, and working in partnership with your partners to sort of really make sure you drive home that impact. I'm just going to open it out now to Andy Brown. And Andy, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on the audience poll. There was cautious, if you like, optimism that responsible businesses are those that are best placed to respond and recover. What are your thoughts on that, and what do you think? Yeah, what are your views on that statement?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think it underlines the point that you were making earlier. So, I mean, certainly, I think, you know, customers and stakeholders are going to remember how we've reacted to this pandemic, this crisis, and I think, you know, those who have acted in a more purposeful way and have, you know, sort about delivering, you know, whatever products or services they create for their customers, but in a way that has also, you know, supported the needs of others in the wider community and understood their role as a business in the wider community, will be remembered and will, you know, potentially have a greater reservoir of trust with customers and wider stakeholders in the future. You it's certainly something that I think we've been seeing with our customers. But even then, we've had to work hard to try and explain to people that water and kind of sewage operators, we are got to be considered as key workers as well. So it's actually been quite valuable as a kind of a communications exercise to explain to people, to bring people closer together with our business and understanding the role that customers play. I mean, you think about this unprecedented spring that we're going through and into summer now. I've just seen some amazing statistics on the kind of daylight sunshine hours, and it's this spring has been the sunniest kind of on record. So we're potentially going into a period where we need our customers to be considerate about their water usage. Hopefully, having that greater connection will enable people to do that. And I think this is, part of the Build Back kind of better message. Certainly what we're seeing is that from a practical point of view, all of the kind of benefits that we've created, and it's difficult to talk about benefits in such a terrible situation that we're in at the moment, but there are quite a number of positive environmental benefits that we want to take forward. Having worked in sustainability for 20 odd years, finally cracking the kind of the behavioural issues about getting people to link up online as we're doing today rather than travel to get somewhere is something that we cannot allow to revert back. I mean, there are benefits from being face to face, obviously, but there's huge environmental potential and positive benefits to be had from driving this into the new normal.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. And I know for sure that with practice we get better at it as well with this digital delivery side of things. I'm just going to open it out now to Lucy and Rebecca. There's obviously been a massive narrative about the celebrating the contribution of our key workers, NHS workers, sort of delivery drivers, supermarket workers, etc. How do you think the COVID crisis might kind of give us an opportunity to sort of change the way we look at key workers, change the way we look at good work and jobs? And I'll ask that to Lucy first, and then Rebecca, if you give us your thoughts after Lucy, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. I mean, I think that it definitely has shone a light on our key workers and what constitutes a key worker. I know that our frontline pharmacists and store colleagues, as well as our warehouse colleagues and our logistics team, have been bowled over really by the response from the public to them throughout the last 10 weeks. Our colleagues have been going into work in the morning and seeing thank you posters taped up on the windows of our store. We've had teddies knitted for them. They've had cakes. They've had drawings from kids, thank you cards, and that real appreciation of what they do on a day-to-day basis has been amazing. And I do feel that will be long-lasting. We've been sharing stories of our colleagues on our social channels, and the media have picked up on some of them as well. And the response from the general public has been almost overwhelmingly positive. So I do feel that actually we need to hang on to that appreciation of our key workers across all sectors, whether that is the NHS, whether that are communications engineers, or our colleagues keeping our utilities going, or our retail colleagues. I really hope that we can hang on to that, and I think that the light that's been shone on those colleagues in the last few weeks will remain. Actually, Rebecca, I don't know what you think. Got a similar community-based business to ourselves. Have you seen similar things?
Certainly we have, Lucy. Yes, I mean it's obviously as the co-op as a major retailer and also leading funeral care provider, we found ourselves right in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, and of course none of us have, I mean anyone on the call, none of us have navigated our way through anything like this before, have we? So we've been kind of taking it step by step and trying to understand what our customers needed from us and what our communities needed from us. And our approach to that, of course, you know, we're a cooperative. We're, you know, the mission is the better way of doing business. We our value, we're very much guided by our values and principles. And, you know, principle 7 of cooperation is around concern for the community, and our ability to marry those things up, because of course our stores and our funeral care homes are in the middle of communities, and those key workers that we're describing, we're still out and about in communities through this. And, you know, Fiona talked about the importance of listening to local causes, listening to customers, listening to communities, and our ability to do that really enhanced our response to this. And so when we talk about the new normal and how things may change going forwards, I think that's an absolutely key part of what we want to maintain. We thought, let's be honest, we thought we were pretty much on that anyway. As I say, we're a cooperative, it's about participation, but it's given us real new impetus to that, and how important it is. You know, we got loads, and I'm sure lots of people on the call were like this, we had loads and loads of requests of help that people needed, so we needed to kind of triage those and really understand where we could make the most impact. So we kind of doubled down on, certainly on the community side, and of course the businesses, it was about securing the supply chains and getting food in store initially and supporting people through very different kind of funerals. On the community side, it was about supporting vulnerable people. So there you saw us doing free school meal vouchers for our co-op academies. We have 25 co-op schools, and that was really important to us. You saw us put in place the community shopping scheme, because of course we didn't have an online shopping offer like many of the other retailers. You saw us pivot our community and our Easter adverts to support fair share, to get food into food banks. Finding volunteers was the second thing that was really important to us, and you saw us get our member pioneers, which are our community activists, really focused on that and setting up and supporting COVID-19 mutual groups. Securing funding, that's a huge bit. I mean, Fiona touched on this already, and we have a partnership with Mind in place, but we also, apart from the fair share piece, we were also working with our local community causes. So that's 4,500 causes that we're working with at any given time, and we accelerated payments to them to do £4.5 million to them. And then finally, I guess an important bit about our members really, and the role as a cooperative of our members. So we've set up a co-op members coronavirus fund where they can contribute their benefits from us into that fund, and also something that we call Cooperate, which is a digital kind of online, almost like a community centre where people can stay connected and get involved in online things. So that's just, I guess, a flavour of the kinds of things we've done, and what we'll be doing going forwards is using our community wellbeing index to really say, okay, we're going to be facing into some really challenging times now, and what is going to help the most, and really keeping that sort of grassroots hyper-local thread to it.
Brilliant, thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Lucy. I'm shortly going to open the questions out to the audience. So just a reminder to the audience that you can type your questions in the questions tab on your control panel. Yeah, please do type away. And before I go to the audience questions, though, I just wanted to talk about the environment. So we've seen this respect for key workers and kind of in the climate, today's climate sort of rise on the agenda, if you like, or the sort of public celebration of key workers. But prior to COVID, we saw climate change and the environment gaining lots and lots of momentum with Greta Thunberg and that whole kind of sort of campaign. I just wanted to ask Fiona and Andy for some quick thoughts on how you think we can keep the environment and climate change high up the agenda in the post-COVID world. So Fiona, would you like to say a few thoughts on that first?
Yeah, so obviously this is really close to our hearts. I mean, Sky went out with a commitment to be net zero carbon by 2030. We've long had a really good program in place in reducing our carbon footprint, and our commitment goes across our whole value chain. So the sentiment of the public is going to be really important if we're going to meet our net zero carbon targets, considering that the majority of our emissions are in our customer homes through our products. So we've been tracking this really carefully. It's really good to see that the sentiment on the environment is really high, and it's probably higher as a result of what we've been going through with COVID-19. I think the other positives are around the fact that this has given businesses to rethink around how they operate as a business, and hopefully a lot of that can stay in place when we return back to a normal of some kind. I mean, our plans of return to site for Sky are very long term. Obviously we're limiting, being our offices are around London areas, limiting substantially the amount of people that are returning to site. And actually we've learned that a lot of people can work very effectively at home if they choose to. So at the same time, we are looking at plans of what a new kind of working arrangement and new working thing is for Sky, after we get through this particular moment in time. But I think it's really important. I mean, we're one of the businesses that have signed and put our commitment around ensuring that we do recover our economy, taking into account the environment and have a green recovery package. I think we've got 18 months now until the next COP26, which is going to happen in November in 2021. But I think it's just as important a time now for businesses to kind of step up, show what we're doing, make our commitments, show and keep that kind of pressure on, so that we do recover the economy and recover our businesses in a way that's going to protect the environment as well. So yeah, all generally, I think the sentiment is there, and I think we just need to continue to crack on.
Brilliant, thanks Fiona. And Andy, was there any additional thoughts you had on that sort of environment point?
Well, yeah, no, just to add strength to that, I absolutely agree. And every business that I've spoken to over the last couple of months has understood the opportunities, the positive opportunities there can be for their own businesses and going forward. So I don't think we will return to the kind of the travel and the meeting culture that we've existed on over the last however many decades. And I think the new champions of that are the finance directors, because they're having the conversation saying, well, hang on a second, we're functioning, but we're not spending all this money on travel and subsistence. So how do we take that forward? I absolutely agree. It's time for businesses to stand up and make sure that the recovery after COVID-19 is a green recovery. And I think there was a real potential for that not to happen, but businesses have all stood up, or lots of businesses have stood up and made that crystal clear. And I think that's landed really, really well. But also, from a well-being perspective, I do a lot of work on kind of mental well-being. And I think actually people and communities have reconnected with nature in a way that they had perhaps become, completely disconnected over the last 20, 30 years or so. And being confined to a local area, people are rediscovering what nature means to them kind of at their home and in their local environment. And I'm very hopeful that that reconnection with nature will continue.
Brilliant. Thank you very much to all our panelists for your thoughts there. We're now going to open it out to the audience. Can I also ask Anna and Ian to turn your cameras on, because you may wish to say some things as well. Anastasia, first question from the audience, please.
Sounds good. Let me know if you can hear me. The first question is the crisis. Perfect. First question is, the crisis has highlighted the unequal impact of COVID-19. What are you doing as a business around diversity and inclusion to make sure vulnerable groups are not affected disproportionately?
Interesting. Okay. I think I'm going to direct that one to Rebecca.
Hi there. Well, it's a really good question. I mean, Ian touched on it in terms of diversity and inclusion and in the report. And I was just thinking about what we're seeing in the US at the moment and across all our faces on here, and you can tell we've got a long way to go, and we're effectively bearing out the statistics that Ian referenced, aren't we? And so I think there's this is a very complicated question, but one of the parts is leadership. So, you know, the Co-op CEO, Steve Morrell's, has been in the Evening Standard actually last night for being the only CEO to have come out on Twitter to comment on the situation in Minneapolis. We also there's so many levels of inequality in what we're seeing in COVID-19, and what we've seen through our community wellbeing index is the things we were focusing on in our community plan, which were spaces, skills, and also mental well-being, are going to be really crucial still for helping us navigate this. So Andrew just touched on the point about spaces, and we had some research out this weekend actually with Fields in Trust talking about the importance of green spaces and coming together to save and support those. In terms of well-being, as I said, we're working with Mind to think through how we can better support people around that. Skills is a really key piece as we all move forward, especially around young people, and I think we're aware that they are going to be a cohort which are going to be really hit with this. Fiona touched on some of the work that Sky are doing in that area too. And in our co-op academies, we're at the kind of front line, I guess, in you know, some of our pupils went back yesterday, and this is going to be a huge challenge. And the whole idea about, you know, free school meals, we had many students there that couldn't get access to computers to get online for their lessons. So there's a whole myriad of challenges that we need to face into in order that, you know, we've talked about the new normal, but in order that we can all move forward to that together. So very difficult question to give a kind of constructive answer to in a couple of minutes, but that's certainly some of the things we're going to be doing.
Brilliant, thank you. You've done a good job here, Rebecca, so thank you for that. Anastasia, could you read the next question, please?
Yes, so the question reads, there's a lot of need to react and make temporary changes during the crisis, but what are some clear, concrete changes you will make as a business learning from the crisis?
Okay, does anyone want to volunteer for that one before I nominate?
Well, I mean, okay. Just going on the point I was making earlier around, you know, the ability to crack the kind of need to travel and you know, be in an office environment. I mean, absolutely, well, both our finance director but also our people director have said, you know, the question now should be not why do you want to work at home, the question should be why do you want to work in the office. So, you know, I absolutely think, you know, the new normal for kind of our working environment will be very, very different. Now, obviously, there is absolutely need for people to be in an office, to be face to face, and actually for some people, we're starting to see now people requesting to go back into an office environment for their own kind of physical and mental well-being. But those seem to be in the minority. What has been amazing is seeing the transition to you know, 4,500 kind of employees, you know, pretty much all working remotely and online, and still managing, you know, our operational frontline services as well. You know, if I'm honest, if I'd have held my hand up at the beginning of this and said, will our IT cope with that? Will our people cope with that? I would have said no. But, you know, here we are, however many months into it, and everything is functioning as it should be. So hopefully, you know, that will be absolutely something that will be part of the new normal rather than reverting to the old normal.
Alex, could I maybe, I think it's very, in response to the question, it's worth reflecting on exactly what Andrew said there, is what's worked well, but also don't forget what this is exposed, the risks this is exposed to your business. So it's in terms of, sometimes there's actions, but there's other things about what knowledge do you have now? What vulnerabilities do you have in your supply chain? What do you depend upon for your business success? And actually look at about re-evaluating that, and also thinking about things like your performance measurement systems, your strategic priorities, and all these different things. Because what it's done is it showed it's involved in things like these systemic kind of problems show up our dependencies on solutions which also fail in times of crisis. And I think that's what an awful lot of businesses have actually kind of have experienced. What you normally, your go-to solutions aren't there. So think about this in a bigger context and look at how you kind of re-engineer and kind of configure your different things, different parts of your business. Sorry.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. I think we've got time for one more question from the audience. Anastasia, if you could.
So someone's asking, how can a company uphold its purpose if future decisions aimed at achieving the economic sustainability of the company will require decisions which may not be socially sustainable?
Oh, that's a thorny one. Lucy, would you like to have a go at that one?
Yeah, I'll have a go at that. So actually, I think harking back to both the previous questions, actually, one thing that we have absolutely learned over the last few weeks is that really making decisions based on our purpose has worked for us. And sometimes those decisions go against what would economically be sensible. So, for example, we have kept the vast majority of our stores and pharmacies open. And that really is so that we can continue to provide that essential service and essential pharmacy provision to those people who need it. Now, actually, financially, it would have been probably better for us to close more of those stores. We have very little footfall into them from a retail perspective over the last few weeks, but yet we felt it was important to make sure that every community had access to a pharmacy. We made that decision based on our purpose and our values as a business, and that has been at the core of our brand and our business for 171 years. As Jessie Boots set up the company to provide healthcare to the working classes of Nottingham, and to make sure that everybody had equal access to that care and those pharmacy provisions. So whether that is people, homeless people coming into our pharmacies and asking for advice on COVID because they're not able to access the advice through normal routes, or whether that's partnering with Hestia, the domestic abuse charity, to provide a safe space in our pharmacies throughout the UK for victims of domestic abuse. They're decisions that we've made very quickly and with an agile mindset over the last few weeks, but they have absolutely been based on being a responsible business. And I do believe that actually long term they will be the right decisions for us. We have had lots and lots of positive response from our customers and from the wider community in terms of making some of those decisions. So yes, it is very tricky as a business to weigh up being responsible with long-term brand and responsible business priorities with kind of short-term economic and financial decisions. And every business is going to have to make those decisions for themselves, but it's absolutely my view that you can sometimes make longer term decisions based on being responsible, and they will see right in the end.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lucy, and thank you to all of our panel for your thoughts there, and thank you to the audience for those probing questions. That's really we're really grateful for your engagement. I'm now going to hand over to Anna to sort of provide some final thoughts and wrap up the webinar. So over to you, Anna.
Great, thank you, Alex. And a huge thank you to our speakers. Repeating again, Professor Ian Thomson from the University of Birmingham, Fiona Ball from Sky, Rebecca Birbeck from the Co-op, Lucy Reynolds from Boots, and Andy Brown from Anglian Water. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing some great examples on how you're responding in a responsible way to the crisis and building back better. And it's interesting hearing Andy saying that stakeholders will remember companies' actions in this crisis, and that responsible businesses will be able to benefit from what Andy called a greater reservoir of trust going forward. Fiona mentioned how Sky are evaluating their community activities and adapting and changing their strategies to ensure that they're driving but also increasing impact, engaging and partnering with charities, with businesses and with suppliers. And Rebecca was saying how concerns for communities is very much already embedded within the Co-op's values, but that the crisis has given a new impetus to the importance of that local engagement and support. And it was great hearing just now, actually, as Lucy responded to one of the questions, how the crisis has highlighted the importance of making decisions that are very much kind of aligned, not only to purpose, but also to long-term sustainability. And I think it was great hearing some optimism from Andy that we have sort of rediscovered what nature means to us as part of this, really embracing those kind of first daily walks outside, but now a bit more freedom to venture out, and that this connection will hopefully continue going forwards. I also wanted to say an additional thank you to Sky for kindly continuing to sponsor the tracker, and to University of Birmingham for partnering with us on the analysis and also the insights feeding into the report. The recording from this webinar will be made available on our website, so please do share with your networks, and pointing out once again that the report is also available for download from our website, so please do read and share. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for contributing with your questions, and please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any further questions or comments. Back to you, Alex.
Brilliant, thank you, Anna. So yeah, just to echo Anna's thoughts there, massive thank you to everybody. We'll get this webinar up on the website, and yeah, we'll leave it there. So have a nice day, everybody. Thank you.